Hello everyone. Today we're diving into a truly extraordinary case, one that's not only a rare occurrence in Black Dragon River Province, but also ranks among the most shocking in the history of the People's Republic of China. What's surprising is that the two criminals at the heart of this story weren't hardened villains to begin with. They were just in their early 20s, seemingly kind-hearted young men. So, what drove them to such madness? Let's unravel the details of the most horrific case in Black Dragon River Province's history. It's 6 p.m. on November 11th, 1995. The police station in Four Stations Town is flooded with emergency calls. The officers on duty realize the situation is dire and immediately alert the town's leadership. At first, the leaders instruct the police to minimize risks and casualties while swiftly pursuing the culprits. But after confirming that nearly 30 people have been killed and the two perpetrators have fled in a jeep toward Jiao Source, they have no choice but to escalate the matter to the Jiao East City police, delaying the investigation by half an hour. Upon receiving the report, Jiao East City's police department mobilizes over 120 officers to apprehend the criminals. By 8:40 p.m., they finally pick up the suspect's trail. By now, the death toll has risen, with 40 people either dead or injured. When the criminals realize the police are closing in, they know escape is impossible. In a desperate bid to go down fighting, they open fire on the pursuing police convoy. According to the officers, the two suspects are armed, one with a hunting rifle, the other with a small rifle, while the police wield standard-issue rifles. The firepower gap is significant, and it doesn't take long for the police to gain the upper hand. One of the criminals is shot dead on the spot, while the other is gravely wounded in the abdomen. Despite his injuries, the surviving suspect refuses to surrender. He takes cover behind some bushes and continues firing at the police. The standoff drags on until 10:30 p.m., when, cornered and out of options, he turns his gun on himself, pulling the trigger at his temple. With that, both killers are dead. After the dust settles, the police identify the two men as River Standing Bright and Feng 10,000 Cs. River Standing Bright grew up in East New Village, Four Stations Town, Jiao East City. His childhood and school years were unremarkable. After graduating, he quickly married and settled into a stable, happy life. Through his connections, River opened a small pharmacy at the town's health clinic. Though the shop was modest, selling only common medicines, business was good. Within a few years, he could afford a Beijing 121 Jeep, a mark of success. But River's life took a darker turn when he began an affair with a married woman named Little Monkey. Little Monkey, a nurse at the health clinic where River Standing Bright worked, quickly grew close to him through their frequent interactions. Despite being married, River didn't hesitate to start a secret affair with her. For Little Monkey, it wasn't just River's witty charm and lively personality that drew her in. She admitted the real glue holding their relationship together was money. Bluntly put, she was with him for his cash, but River had a family to support and an elderly mother to care for. Even though his pharmacy business was doing well, it couldn't keep up with his mistress's expectations. Soon enough, Little Monkey dumped him and moved on to Old Lou, a bank employee in town. The breakup hit River hard, leaving him in a slump for weeks. Just when he thought things couldn't get worse, an even bigger blow came his way. Two local pharmacy owners, one named Ji and the other Jiao, were jealous of River's thriving business. They approached the clinic's director, Hao, and deputy director, Bai, asking them to use their connections to oust River and take over his pharmacy contract. Director Hao met with River to negotiate, but River flat out refused to budge. When their plan failed, Ji and Jiao hatched a scheme to ruin him. River had recently brought in a shipment of medicine from out of town. The drugs weren't fake, but in his rush to make a profit, he'd skipped some regulatory steps. Seizing the opportunity, Director Hu and Jiao reported him to the local police. Citing incomplete paperwork, the authorities confiscated River's entire shipment. Furious and convinced he'd been set up, River's resentment festered. He vowed to make them pay. He even confided his anger to his wife, but she dismissed it as hot-headed talk and paid it no mind. The second criminal, Feng 10,000 Cs, was 4 years older than River. His father, frustrated that Feng hadn't amounted to much, urged him to pool money with his cousins to buy a Beijing 121 Jeep and start a taxi business in the area. If Feng had stuck to driving taxis, he might have avoided his tragic end. But life is unpredictable. In January 1995, while eating at a local diner with two friends, Feng got into a heated argument with a young man at the next table. The dispute turned physical, and Feng's group, outnumbering the other guy, beat him badly. The police were called but didn't press charges, only ordering Feng and his friends to cover the victim's medical bills. Initially, the hospital fees totaled 9,000 yuan, split evenly at 3,000 yuan each. But soon after, the hospital claimed the costs had risen and demanded an additional 20,000 yuan. The police tracked them down again, requiring each to cough up another 7,000 yuan. Feng 10,000C's two friends came from wealthier families and quickly paid their share of the hospital fees. But Feng, strapped for cash, kept dodging the payment with excuses. Since it was just an unpaid debt and not a serious crime, the police let it slide without pursuing him further. So Feng went back to driving his taxi around town. One morning, while grabbing breakfast, he was spotted by two police officers eating nearby. They confronted him, demanding he settle the 7,000 yuan hospital bill. Panicked and cornered, Feng mumbled an agreement to go home and get the money. He drove his jeep with the officers tailing closely behind. But when they reached his gate, Feng bolted from the vehicle and fled. Unable to catch him, the officers seized his jeep instead. The problem was, the jeep didn't belong to Feng alone. It was co-owned by his cousins, who all depended on it for their livelihood. Losing their source of income threw Feng and his family into chaos. His cousins, frantic, demanded he find a way to get the jeep back. But with the police hot on his trail, Feng didn't dare show his face at home. Under pressure from his family, he sent his older brother to retrieve the vehicle, only to learn the police were demanding a 1,200 yuan parking fee. By now, the family was financially drained. They scraped together 1,000 yuan by borrowing from everyone they knew, but because they were 200 yuan short, the police refused to release the jeep. That small sum, 200 yuan, was the final straw, igniting a burning hatred for the police in Feng's heart. And it was at this moment that he crossed paths with River Standing Bright. River and Feng weren't close. They were just acquaintances who knew each other by sight, but their shared grudges forged a bond between them. Though neither had committed serious crimes before, both were hot-headed and prone to extreme actions. In their early 20s, they were easily swept up by their emotions. Eventually, River agreed to team up with Feng to exact revenge, vowing to teach a lesson to everyone who had ever bullied, belittled, or humiliated them. They even drew up a hit list of their targets. With their plan set, the next step was to secure weapons. At the time, gun control wasn't as strict, and with a permit, hunting rifles and ammunition could be purchased legally. River's family already owned a double-barreled shotgun, but he deemed it insufficient. Determined, he managed to acquire a small-caliber training rifle and 2 boxes of ammunition to bolster their arsenal. Though the training rifle could hold 11 rounds and fire in rapid succession, River Standing Bright wasn't satisfied. He found the small-caliber bullets lacking in destructive power. Determined to up their firepower, he visited a hunting supply store in Jiao East City and purchased 300 size 16 shotgun shells for his double-barreled shotgun. These rounds were devastating. Capable of taking down large livestock like cows or horses at close range, humans didn't stand a chance. With their weapons and ammunition secured, River and Feng retreated to a dense local forest to practice shooting. After over a week of relentless training, they were ready to unleash their revenge. Unlike typical killers who strike covertly or flee after their crimes, these two were brazen, declaring they wanted to kill as many people as possible until they could kill no more. Their warped worldview had twisted them beyond reason. At around 6 p.m. on November 11, 1995, the pair set out with their guns. Their first stop was the home of Little Monkey, River's former lover. River, humiliated by her leaving him for a wealthier man, intended to kill her. When they arrived, Little Monkey wasn't home, only her husband, Lai, his younger brother, and 4 friends playing mahjong were there. But River's cold-blooded nature showed no mercy. Even without his intended target, he and Feng didn't hesitate. They drew their weapons and opened fire. After a barrage of deafening shots, all 6 men lay dead in pools of blood. This was just the beginning of the horrific rampage to come. Next, the pair moved to a house 15 meters away, belonging to a man named Xiao. His family of 4 was eating dinner when River and Feng barged in. Without a word, they raised their guns and gunned down every last one of them. The duo then headed for the home of Deputy Director Bai. Hearing the gunfire, Bai stepped outside to investigate, only to come face to face with the armed killers. Terrified, he dropped to his knees, sobbing and begging for his life. Before he could finish his pleas, River shot him point blank in the head, killing him instantly. At the home of the pharmacy owner Jiao, the scene repeated. His family of 4 was sharing dinner when they were slaughtered on the spot. The sound of gunfire echoed through the night, spreading terror across the town. The pair then drove to another house, where a man was chatting with his family and friends. River and Feng stormed in, spraying bullets and leaving everyone dead, blood pooling across the floor. After this string of gruesome murders, Feng 10, Thousand Seas and River Standing Bright sped away from the scene, but their bloodlust was far from sated. Hungry for more, they scoured their revenge list for additional targets. As they drove down a quiet road, they spotted a group of workers on the job. Without a moment's hesitation, they stopped the jeep, took aim, and opened fire, cutting down countless innocent lives in a hail of bullets. After murdering Little Monkey's new lover, Steven, they headed to the homes of others who held grudges against Jeremy Li Ming or had clashed with Felix Wan Hai. In total, they killed or injured 19 people, spiraling into a frenzy of uncontrollable violence. While driving, they callously ran over and killed anyone who blocked their path. Their stolen car kept breaking down, so they stole 2 more jeeps, one in 5 Mile Town and another in New Prosperity Village, killing 1 person and injuring 3 others. All this carnage unfolded in just 2 hours. Fearing the police would track their vehicle, they abandoned the old car near the 7-8 Mile grain depot and stole a new jeep, killing another person and wounding several more. They then drove toward Dawn Plains, not to escape but to continue their killing spree. Fortunately, the police quickly picked up their trail. After a fierce shootout, the criminals finally surrendered. Felix Wan Hai was shot dead by the police, and Jeremy Li Ming, cornered, took his own life with his gun. The rampage came to an end, but not without a devastating toll. 48 victims, 32 dead, and 16 severely injured, affecting 37 families. Among them, 7 members of a single family in Willowtown were slaughtered. Thankfully, the 2 criminals met their end, paying the price for the countless lives they destroyed. Had they not been stopped, who knows how many more innocent people would have fallen to their merciless guns.
We will delve into a horrifying murder case that shook the entire United States. In 1984, a young woman was brutally murdered inside her own home. However, what made this case even more shocking was that her husband and his best friend accused each other, with each claiming that the other was the real killer. The police knew that one of them was lying, but with no conclusive evidence to convict either man, both were released. It wasn't until 3 years later that a renowned Chinese-American detective, Dr. Li Xiangyu, stepped in and changed the course of the investigation. By reconstructing the crime scene, Dr. Li was able to quickly identify the suspect and successfully solve a case that had seemed completely unsolvable. The crime took place on February 24th, 1984, in Louisiana, USA. That night, the city was alive with the celebrations of Carnival, and while people were enjoying the vibrant festival, the New Orleans police received a frantic emergency call. The man on the other end of the line was in a state of absolute panic. Through his broken, frantic speech, officers learned that he had been attacked, and even worse, his wife had been brutally murdered. Given the urgency of a homicide case occurring on a major festival night, the New Orleans police quickly dispatched officers to the scene. However, when they arrived, what they saw sent chills down their spines. A woman lay lifeless on the floor, her body covered in blood and severe wounds. The walls behind her were splattered with blood, and the floor was in complete disarray. After a preliminary examination, police determined that the victim had been killed with a blunt object. The murder weapon was identified as a blood-stained baseball bat, found lying next to the body. Additionally, the victim's home was ransacked. Picture frames, glasses, plates, and even lamps had been shattered. In the kitchen, police discovered a bloodstained knife. And in another room, they found a young boy unconscious and a crying infant, who, fortunately, was unharmed. The man who had called the police was Carey, the victim's husband. He confirmed that the murdered woman was indeed his wife, Janet. Carey was still visibly shaken, his eyes filled with disbelief at what had just happened. But after a moment, his shock turned into rage, and he declared to the police that his best friend, Bill, was the one who had murdered Janet. According to Carey's statement, he had returned home at around 3 p.m. As soon as he stepped inside, Bill suddenly emerged from inside the house, wielding a baseball bat, and attacked him without warning. During the struggle, Carey's arm was broken, but he managed to fight back and stab Bill with a knife before Bill fled the scene. Listening to Carey's account, police initially believed that Bill had killed Janet, and that Carey had gotten into a violent altercation with him afterward. With Carey's testimony, the bloodied weapons, and clear physical evidence, the case seemed straightforward. Shortly after, police arrested Bill and officially charged him with murder. Just when everyone was expecting a swift verdict, something unexpected happened. Half of the jury members refused to reach a final conclusion, causing the case to come to a deadlock and ultimately becoming a cold case. This raised a critical question. Why did what seemed like a straightforward case make the jury hesitate? What exactly happened during the trial? As it turned out, according to Carey, the moment he stepped into his house, Bill attacked him with a baseball bat. He claimed that he only used a knife in self-defense and had accidentally injured Bill. However, when the judge turned to Bill's testimony, an entirely different story emerged. Bill claimed that he had attacked Carey with a baseball bat only in self-defense. According to him, when he arrived at Carey's house, he found Janet unconscious on the floor. To prevent Carey from continuing his attack, he had no choice but to use the bat to restrain him. During their struggle, he accidentally broke Carey's arm, and in retaliation, Carey stabbed him with a knife before he managed to escape. This created a major contradiction. Both men accused each other, making it unclear who was telling the truth. Despite their conflicting statements, there was one strange yet consistent detail in both of their testimonies. Both Carey and Bill claimed that their fight started at the entrance, continued into the living room, then into the hallway. But what was even more shocking, they fought continuously for 10 hours. During this prolonged fight, they even took breaks multiple times to drink water and watch TV, before resuming their brawl until Bill was injured and fled the scene. Even more disturbing, both men insisted that during the entire fight, neither of them paid any attention to Janet, who lay motionless in the living room. It wasn't until the fight ended that Carey finally noticed his wife was no longer breathing. Seeing the head injury caused by the baseball bat, he immediately assumed Bill was the murderer and called the police. From both testimonies, police confirmed that both Carey and Bill were present at the scene when Janet was killed. However, since both men had handled the baseball bat during their struggle, forensic analysis could not determine who had actually used it to attack Janet. Aside from the two suspects, the only other people in the house were Carey and Janet's two children, a 2-year-old and a newborn baby. Clearly, neither of them could provide any useful testimony. Without concrete evidence, police were unable to charge either man, and the case remained a mystery. This cold case dragged on for 3 years. Despite the police's best efforts, they failed to determine the true murderer. With the case at standstill, the New Orleans police decided to call in an expert forensic analyst, Dr. Li Xiangyu, to assist with the investigation. Upon reviewing the case files, Dr. Li immediately noticed that the police had been investigating in the wrong direction from the start. They had focused too much on the testimonies of Carey and Bill, but since both were potential murderers, their statements were unreliable and could not be the key to solving the case. Instead, Dr. Li believed that only hard physical evidence would uncover the truth. But how could they find new evidence after so many years? Dr. Li decided to dig deeper into the social relationships between Carey, Bill, and Janet. Through his investigation, he discovered that all three had been childhood friends. However, despite growing up together, their lives took very different paths as they entered adulthood. Carey had a stable life, with a beautiful wife and a steady job. Meanwhile, Bill was struggling. He had no stable job or income, and his temper was growing increasingly short-fused and unpredictable. Because of their childhood friendship, Carrie often helped Bill through tough times. One would expect Bill to be grateful, but the reality was quite the opposite. Not only did Bill betray Carrie's kindness, but he also began a secret affair with Carrie's wife, Janet. When Carrie discovered the affair, he was furious and went to confront Bill. The two got into a heated argument, which eventually led to the collapse of Bill's own family. His wife left him, taking their child with her. Devastated by this sudden loss, Bill completely broke down. He trashed his own house in a fit of rage, and, as if driven by some blind impulse, he went to Carrie's house. And that was when the tragedy unfolded. Two theories emerged. One, Bill, consumed by anger over losing his family, sought revenge on Carrie by murdering Janet. Two, Carrie, unable to forgive the betrayal by both his wife and best friend, killed Janet in a fit of rage. Both men had motives. Both men had the opportunity. But in the end, who was the real killer? To uncover the truth, physical evidence from the crime scene had to be examined. Dr. Li Xiangyu, a renowned forensic specialist, arrived at the scene to re-examine everything. He conducted a meticulous inspection, making sure no detail was overlooked. Right away, he noticed something strange. According to the initial police report, Janet had been murdered in the bedroom. However, small bloodstains were found all over the house, in the kitchen, hallway, walls, floors, and even on the furniture. Initially, police dismissed these stains, believing they were Carrie and Bill's blood from their fight, and didn't examine them closely. But Dr. Li, approaching the case with a fresh perspective, decided to retest all the bloodstains. The results stunned the police. Among the blood samples, Janet's blood was also found, mixed with that of Carrie and Bill. Based on the pattern of the blood spatter, Dr. Li concluded that this was not a premeditated murder. Instead, it appeared to have started as a small argument or struggle that escalated out of control, ultimately leading to a deadly attack. Now, the question remained, between Carrie and Bill, who was more likely to turn a verbal fight into a deadly assault? Carrie, as Janet's husband, had a stronger personal motive. However, identifying the killer could not rely on assumptions alone. Concrete evidence was necessary. Dr. Li continued his meticulous examination. He turned his attention to the clothes that Carrie and Bill wore on the day of the murder. On both outfits, he found extensive blood spatter. This detail had been noted by police before, but once again, they had dismissed it, believing that the blood splatter was a natural result of their fight. Dr. Li, however, was not convinced. He decided to analyze the blood patterns on their clothing. When the forensic results came back, they were even more shocking. The majority of the blood on both men's clothing belonged to Janet. It wasn't surprising to find Janet's blood on Carrie's clothes, since he had physical contact with her. However, finding Janet's blood on Bill's clothes was unusual. It strongly indicated that Bill was directly involved in the attack. At this point, many believed that the case was finally solved, and Bill was the prime suspect. But then, Dr. Li dropped an even bigger bombshell. The murder was not committed by just one person. Instead, Carrie had an accomplice. By carefully analyzing the blood patterns on their clothes, Dr. Li discovered that the spatter was of medium velocity, a pattern typically seen when a person is violently attacked while still alive. If Janet had already been dead, no matter how much she was beaten afterward, her blood would not have created such a splatter pattern. This meant that when Janet was attacked, she was still alive. And since both Carrie and Bill had extensive blood spatter on their clothes, it proved that they were both present when Janet was fatally assaulted. The autopsy report further confirmed that Janet did not die immediately after the attack. Instead, she suffered for a period of time, ultimately dying due to a lack of medical attention. To dig even deeper, Dr. Li took Carrie's bloodstained shirt for forensic testing. The results confirmed that all the blood on Carrie's shirt belonged to Janet. Carrie claimed that the blood got on him when he hugged his wife. But Dr. Li was not convinced. After careful microscopic examination, he discovered that the bloodstains on Carrie's shirt were not from simple contact. Instead, the blood had been forcefully sprayed onto his clothes. indicating that Janet had been attacked violently while she was still alive. This proved that Carey was not just a grieving husband who found his wife's body. He was actively involved in her death. Dr. Lee Seong-yu speculated that the blood spatter might have resulted from Janet being struck with a baseball bat. To verify this hypothesis, he returned to the crime scene to re-examine the blood patterns on the walls, particularly where Janet was attacked. And just as he suspected, he found new crucial evidence. Based on the distribution of the bloodstains, Dr. Lee was able to determine the exact positions of both the killer and Janet at the time of the attack. More importantly, he made a groundbreaking conclusion. The killer was left-handed. Only a left-handed person could have produced bloodstains at that specific angle and force from that position. In reality, Bill was right-handed, but Carey was left-handed. At last, the truth was becoming clear. Carey was the murderer. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Carey completely broke down and confessed to everything. On the day of the murder, Carey had gone to Bill's house in a fit of rage after discovering the affair between his best friend and his wife, Janet. After causing a scene at Bill's house, he stormed back home, seething with anger. When he stepped inside, he saw Janet doing laundry in the kitchen. All the pain and fury from the betrayal resurfaced, and he immediately began shouting at her. The argument quickly escalated into physical violence. Janet, despite being physically weaker, fought back. However, she was no match for Carey. In a desperate attempt to escape, Janet grabbed a nearby ashtray and threw it at her husband, hoping to defend herself. This only enraged Carey further. He grabbed the baseball bat near the door and swung it at Janet. At that exact moment, Bill entered the house. But instead of calming the situation, Bill's presence only made Carey more furious. Blinded by rage, Carey turned his full attention to Janet and began beating her relentlessly with the bat. Blood splattered everywhere. Janet suffered severe injuries, and Carey only stopped when it was too late, when she lay motionless in a pool of blood. By then, his clothes and the floor were soaked in Janet's blood. As the reality of what he had done sank in, Carey started to panic. Overcome by fear and desperation, he begged Bill to help him cover up the crime and avoid punishment. In a shocking turn of events, perhaps out of guilt or emotional pressure, Bill agreed to help Carey. For nearly 10 hours, they fabricated an entirely false story, hoping to deceive the investigators. To make the scene look more convincing, Bill hit Carey with the baseball bat, causing an actual injury. In return, Carey stabbed Bill with a knife, creating fake evidence of a struggle. They thought their plan was foolproof, but they underestimated Dr. Lee Seong-yu. With his experience and sharp analytical skills, Dr. Lee easily exposed their deception. On March 28, 1990, 6 years after Janet's murder, Carey was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder. Although Bill did not physically commit the murder, he was still convicted of second-degree murder for helping Carey cover up the crime. As a result, Bill was sentenced to 21 years in prison. However, in reality, Bill only served 10 years before being granted parole. Carey's sentence was also reduced twice, and he was released after serving 30 years. The main reason both men received reduced sentences was Janet's family's incredible act of forgiveness. Despite their grief and loss, her family chose to show mercy, believing that Carey and Bill deserved a second chance, hoping they would change and live to make amends. In the end, Janet's case serves as a powerful reminder. Uncontrolled emotions can lead to irreversible consequences. Because of one moment of anger, jealousy, and selfishness, two men destroyed not only the life of an innocent woman, but also their own lives. Had they been patient, rational, and willing to confront their emotions calmly, would this tragedy have happened? Sometimes, one wrong decision is all it takes to change an entire lifetime. So what do you think about this case? The decisions you make in life don't just affect you. They also impact those around you. That's why it's crucial to think carefully before you act. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming infamous crime stories and thrilling cases. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.